everybody, it's Jane. I hope you're doing incredible. The stamp companies this year came out with some amazing fall stencils, and I had to get them and to put them to good use. I paired them with Distress Oxide inks, which are so easy to blend, and you get a seamless transition from one color to the next. I used quite a few of the Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design stamps and dies, which are incredible for and also for a clean and simple look as well. Every envelope has a matching stamp or a coordinating stamp on them, and this is what I used. So the first thing I did was I started out with the stencils. This is the Simon Says Stamp Tumbling Leaves. The second one is the Gina K thick brush. I'm taking them out so you can actually see them, and I keep them in these great protectors. And then the last one is the Altenew, and it is the Leaf Burst stencil, which I absolutely love. And there are so many ideas I could have used for these. I just ran out of time. So the first thing I do is I start out with my Tim Holtz Splat Box with my Pixie spray, and I shake it up really well. I spray my stencil, and that gives it a great stick, and I center that onto my paper, and that way it keeps the little edges from peeling up so that I don't have any mistakes with my Oxide inks. So I use peeled paint, forest moss, and I mowed lawn for this one. I use my Tailored Expressions blending brushes, which I love because the color of the handle matches the color of the ink that I'm using. I always do a little stamp off, I guess is the word I'm looking for, on the side before I take the ink to paper so I don't have too much. And look how absolutely beautiful that looked. The second one I use is the Altenew stencil, and I did the same thing, only this one I picked some of the red and orange Distress Oxide inks. And if you see that Oxide ink on the left, on the right, in hindsight, I should have gotten it wet and put paper to it and not thrown the ink away. But I didn't think about it till just now. So I'm using Barn Door, Fired Brick, and Candied Apple. Speeding it up again a little bit quick so you don't watch me blend. It's really easy to blend these Oxide inks. Trust me if you haven't tried it. So I'm going with a smooth transition here, and you will see that when time I got all of the ink down, they all look the same. So I went back and added some ripe persimmon and some wild honey, and I put those on top of what I already did. And when I peel it back, you will absolutely see the difference in how it looks. And I can see I wasn't really happy there. Peel it back, add a little red. Oh, I think that's good. This is the Gina K. I'm not sure what this one's called. I'll link it in everything below. I'm sorry about that. I can't remember. And I did the wild honey, ripe persimmon, and candied apple for this one. Getting it all blended in, adding a little bit of red at the bottom. Peeled that off. I always give a little peek to make sure I like it. And then I'm using the Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design All the Thanks Stamp and Die. I love the way Kathy does her designs. They're so clean and simple, and they all have matching dies. I put that in my Mini Misty, giving it a little stamp. And I used Distress Oxide inks. Now what I'm doing is conditioning my stamp because it's new. And typically I don't stamp with Distress Oxide inks because they will smear a little bit. But because I'm going to put clear embossing powder on top of them, I wanted the Oxide inks to match what I used on my cards. So I give this a little double stamp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off my stamp, and I'm going to use Brutus Monroe embossing ink, and I'm going to use Hero Arts clear, ultrafine clear embossing powder, and I'm going to emboss the sentiment with clear ink. And I love the way this comes out. It gives you just a little bit of sheen. I'm always looking for the dimension. I'm always looking for something just to add to it. I'm going to use my Wagner heat tool. I'm going to get it good and hot and take it to paper so the paper doesn't warp. And the Cisterna little containers are awesome. And I got the spoon at an ice cream store. I asked them if I could have some spoons, and they said sure. So I love the way embossing powder melts. It's just so fun. I don't care how many times I do it. It just looks so cool. So I'm taking that to my All the Thanks, and then I'm going to lay this out with a die. And I have my 1/2-inch purple tape there with the little tape dispenser. And I'm going to lay it out. I apologize for my head. It's hard to get in there if you don't have your head in there. If I had a ponytail, you wouldn't even notice. And I'm going to lay that out. I'm going to run that through my Gemini Junior die cut machine. It is absolutely my favorite die cut machine because I can be doing other things while it's running through. I know all those seconds do add up. The Simon Says Stamp Wonky Rectangle is one of my favorite rectangles to use, and it gives you great dimension. I shouldn't say dimension, great detail on the edges of your cardstock. So I'm going to lay that out, and I felt that it was just getting a little bit lost, and in hindsight, I should have cut it out of the orangey paper and embossed it in white, but at the time, I wasn't thinking that way. So whenever things get lost in the cards, I always grab a vellum and put vellum behind it, and it always makes it pop up a little bit more. So I'm trying to figure out where do I want that strip to be, how far down on this card do I want it to be. I ran my tape runner along the sides. I'm lining it up here to make sure that it's even. I use my glass media mat, which I adore because it cleans so easily. I'm going to put some 3M tape on the back of All the Thanks. In the meantime, I'm cutting some craft foam and putting that behind the card. I love to use craft foam. And just to give it a little dimension, I'm popping this up, centering it, hitting it down and going, okay, looks good. I keep all of my paper on these rings, and this is how I get my colors. So I'm not going through all my colors trying to figure out what's what, because I do have my paper in different areas. And I made a card base out of the Gina K Coral Reef. I always like to put something heavy on it while it dries. These are some sequins I had in my stash, and what I do is I lay them all out on the card, and I'm sorry the card is completely out of frame. I lay them all out, see if I like them, then I pick them up with my left hand in my Crystal Catania jewel picker, which I know is a little on the pricey side, but it is worth every penny. And then I will set that card aside to dry. What do you think? Came out really cute, don't you think? I love it. I can't wait to mail it. For the next card, I'm going to my green and blue ring of paper, and I'm going, well, which color do I want to use? I did like this one, but I thought I wanted a little bit more of the bright green, so I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn Noble Fur, and I'm going to fold that. It's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm scoring it with my bone folder, which is another thing that I really love. I cut the top panel down to 4 by 5 1/4. And I am also using the Stamp Market Thank You So Much die and matching stamp. Again, I'm going to heat emboss these with clear embossing ink. I put both of them in there, and I'm conditioning my stamp again because it's new. And I'm using my Distress Oxide Inks as well. And I think I stamped this about 3 or 4 times just to get a really good impression. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a double layer of embossing, clear embossing ink. The reason I'm doing a double layer is that it really smooths it out and it makes it just a little bit higher, so it just gives it a little bit more dimension. And because of the MISTI, it's so easy to put it back in because it's all lined up and it just stamps exactly where I stamped before. Still using the Brutus Monroe embossing ink and the Hero Arts Ultra Fine Clear Embossing Powder. And here we go. Don't you wish you could make cards that fast in real life? The nice thing about having the double layer of embossing is that when you put your die on, it fits right in there. So here it is cut out. And then what I did was I cut 3 more out and I layered them on top of each other, so that I have some really thick dimensional sentiment. And there you go. See how thick that is? It looks like a chipboard or something like that. Now I have a lot of ribbon in my stash that I never use, and so I made a commitment to myself that I want to use some of my ribbon. So I put the ribbon on the same way that I did the vellum in the previous card. And then this is my trick to giving it a little knot. I put the ribbon across, then I do a separate piece, fold it, pull it tight, and then you can slide that back and forth depending on where you want it to be. And then I cut the edges of my ribbon. Always cut them on an angle. It gives it a much more finished look. I'm trying to figure out where I want my thanks so much to be. Got it going. And then the honeybee came out with these amazing little gems. I used to buy silver ones and color them with Sharpies, which I still do. But I love these. And because of the little points in these leaves, I was able to follow that and figure out where I want them to go. I am using I call it a picker-upper from Stampin' Up, and that is how I pick up my gems. I put it on the tip of my picker-upper, and it works really well. And there's card number 2. I'm always afraid that my videos are going to be so long that maybe I cut them a little bit too short. I'm not really sure. So this particular one is the other stencil that I use, and I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Joyful Die set. It also has a shadow. So I cut the shadow out of Ellen Hudson 40-pound vellum, and I cut 3 of the Joyfuls, and I stack them all on top of each other again to give that added dimension, just what I tend to do for all of my dies. And then that little dot, which is called a tittle, I don't know if you knew that, but that little dot is the tittle, and I want to make sure that I have layered that up as well. So I've learned that it's just easier just to put one on and then stack them up that way. I'm using my T-ruler to make sure everything is straight and even. And then I'm going to use my Nuvo drops, and you always give them a little burp first to make sure that you get all the air out of them. And I did make a mistake. One of the dots did come out blobby, and I will show you how I fixed it. You can see right there. If you take, well, I call it the picker-upper, and you scrape it off really easily, and then you can hit it with a mono sand eraser. In my situation, I didn't need one, and I put my dot back on there, and you'd never know I made a mistake. So if you ever glob out your Nuvo drops, that is how you fix them. You got to do it right away, though. Do not wait for it to dry. And there you have it. Jane going too fast again. And I apologize, and maybe someday I'll get a little bit better. But give them a try. The cards are really easy to make, and I can't wait to send them out. Thanks for stopping by.